It started with a laugh, not a polite one, not nervous, but sharp, cutting, like someone mocking the very air of the courtroom. Cameras turned instantly. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Even Judge Judy, who had seen it all, raised an eyebrow. There she was, Karen Blake, the influencer everyone loved to hate. Perfect hair, designer suit, and that smirk that made the whole internet stop. She had built an empire out of attitude, out of relatable chaos, as she called it. But that morning, standing before one of America's toughest judges, her confidence looked less like charm and more like arrogance. "Are you laughing at the verdict, Ms. Blake?" Judge Judy's tone was calm, but the courtroom knew what that tone meant. It was the storm before thunder. Karen shrugged, still half smiling. "Not at all, Your Honor. I just find this entertaining." Entertaining. The word sliced through the air. Somewhere behind her, her ex-assistant, Mia Torres, looked down, visibly shrinking. The audience murmured. Even the cameraman flinched, as if realizing this was no ordinary case. Friends, you won't believe how it all began. Just weeks earlier, the case had seemed routine, a dispute over a broken contract and unpaid wages. But the moment Karen walked into that courtroom, everything changed. She carried herself like she was still live streaming to millions. Every gesture, every glance toward the camera felt rehearsed. To her, this wasn't a trial. It was another episode. And in a way, it was. Only this time the script wasn't hers to control. Judge Judy leaned forward. "Ms. Blake, this isn't a stage, and you're not here to perform." But Karen didn't flinch. She was used to authority, used to bending truth until it looked beautiful under filters and edits. Her followers adored her for it. They called her bold, real, unapologetic. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the woman behind the ring light was something else entirely. The courtroom audience could sense it. Something was off. The tension hung heavy, the kind you could almost hear humming in the silence. Each second stretched longer than the last. Somewhere a chair creaked. A bailiff shifted his stance. Judge Judy's eyes stayed fixed on the influencer who dared to mock justice. "Ms. Blake," Judy said slowly, "I suggest you start taking this seriously. You're under oath." Karen crossed her arms. "Of course, Your Honor." She smiled again, too perfectly, too polished. Viewers online would later replay that moment hundreds of times. Some would call it confidence. Others would call it disrespect. But those who watched closely, those who studied the way her eyes darted, how her jaw tightened beneath the smile, would see something else. Fear. Because Karen Blake wasn't just being judged for her behavior in that room. She was being judged for something far bigger, something she thought she had buried deep beneath layers of glamour and followers. But Judge Judy had a way of finding the truth. Always had. "Let's begin," Judy said. Her gavel struck once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. For the first few minutes, the case unfolded normally. Legal documents, statements, basic questioning. But every time Karen spoke, there was that tone. Mocking, condescending, as if she were too smart, too famous, too untouchable to be there. She wasn't nervous. She was amused. And that's what made it so strange. Most people, when facing a televised trial, tremble. Their voices crack. But not her. She grinned. She made little comments under her breath. She even winked toward the camera once, as if saying, "Watch me win." Friends, you imagine laughing at the very idea of accountability. Believing fame can protect you from truth. That's exactly what Karen did. But what she didn't realize was that her laughter had already sealed her fate. Because while she was busy performing for her audience, Judge Judy was watching every move, every flicker of emotion, every inconsistency in her tone. And behind that calm, razor-sharp gaze, Judy was connecting dots no one else could see. The audience couldn't feel it yet, but something monumental was about to break. This wouldn't be just another viral courtroom clip. This would be the moment an influencer's empire began to crumble, live, raw, unedited. Karen's laughter would become a symbol, a soundbite repeated across millions of screens. But in that moment, she didn't know it. She thought she was in control. And when Judy finally leaned back and said, "We'll get to the truth soon enough," Karen smiled again, mocking, dismissive. That's when Judy looked straight at her and said softly, "Ms. Blake, I've dealt with liars for 40 years, and the clever ones always smile right before the fall." The room froze. Karen blinked. Her laughter faltered. Outside the courtroom, the world kept spinning. Fans tweeted her name. Cameras waited for her exit shot. But inside, something had shifted. The story wasn't about a contract anymore. It was about truth and what happens when the mask finally cracks on live television. Friends, stay with me, because what Judge Judy uncovered next would make that first laugh echo forever in the history of her courtroom. And it was only the beginning. Before she ever set foot in Judge Judy's courtroom, Karen Blake had already built a kingdom, not of stone or steel, but of screens. Her world lived inside a phone, a perfect home that smelled of fresh flowers, a perfect smile that never trembled, a perfect life crafted one post at a time. Every morning, millions woke up to see what Karen was wearing, what she ate, how she exercised, how she stayed humble. Her followers called her the Queen of Realness. But what they saw wasn't real at all. Behind every post was a deleted truth. Behind every smile was someone shaking off exhaustion, snapping at assistants, and editing the same photo 50 times before calling it spontaneous. She called her fans family, but her real family hadn't spoken to her in years. Her feed glowed with kindness quotes, while her private messages burned with threats and manipulation. And for a long time it worked. She was untouchable. Until she met Mia Torres. Mia wasn't famous. She was 24, hardworking, loyal, and grateful for the opportunity to work with someone she admired. She believed in Karen, believed the kindness she saw online was real. But soon the illusion started to crack. Karen called her names behind closed doors. She'd scream over small mistakes, demand she answer messages at midnight, and withhold paychecks when content wasn't good enough. She didn't fight back, not at first. She stayed quiet, like so many others before her. Until one day, Karen went too far. In a live stream that would later be deleted but never forgotten, Karen joked about lazy assistants who leech off talent. She didn't name Mia, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew who she meant. The humiliation spread like wildfire. Mia's inbox filled with hate, her reputation shattered. That's when she spoke up. In a quiet, heartfelt post, Mia wrote about her experience, not to destroy Karen, but to defend herself. She wrote, "Sometimes the people who preach kindness online are the cruelest in private." Karen's response was a lawsuit. Defamation, she called it. She claimed Mia's post cost her brand deals and reputation. She swore it was all lies. She hired lawyers, crafted statements, and smiled for interviews as if she was the victim of betrayal. "You give someone everything," she said on a podcast, "and they stab you for attention." To her millions of followers, the story was simple. Karen was the innocent one. The assistant was the villain. But behind that camera-ready voice, something darker lingered. Her team begged her to settle privately. They said, "It's not worth it. Let it go." But Karen couldn't. She needed to win, publicly, dramatically, because her image was her empire. Losing in court would mean losing everything. So she filed the case. And when she heard she'd be appearing before Judge Judy, she didn't hesitate. She smiled. She thought it would be good television. Friends, imagine that level of confidence to walk into Judge Judy's courtroom thinking it's a photo shoot. Karen arrived early that morning, hair perfectly styled, designer bag in hand. Reporters snapped photos. She smiled at every camera, radiating charm. But what no lens caught were her hands, trembling slightly as she scrolled through her own feed, reminding herself who she was supposed to be. Inside, the cameras rolled. And the moment she sat down, Judge Judy noticed everything. The over-rehearsed posture, the too perfect tone, the fake humility dripping between words. Karen called me up a liar, said she'd fabricated everything for attention, said the videos and messages were edited. But every time she spoke, Judy's eyes narrowed a little more. The cracks were subtle, a glance too quick, a sentence too rehearsed, a tremor beneath the confidence. Karen laughed them off, as she always did. But that laugh, the same one that would later echo around the internet, it didn't sound as natural as before. Because deep down, she knew this time was different. She wasn't behind a screen. She couldn't mute, delete, or block the truth. And the woman sitting across from her, the one...
The room was silent, but it wasn't peace. It was pressure, the kind that builds before a storm. You could hear papers shuffle, a throat clear, the faint hum of cameras. And then, his voice, confident, sharp, almost theatrical. "Your Honor, if we're done wasting time, perhaps we can begin." The corporate lawyer smirked as he adjusted his tie, every gesture polished, every word chosen to command the room. He didn't look nervous, he looked amused. And there she was, Judge Judy, seated in her chair, hands folded, gaze steady. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just watched him, like a hawk watching something it's already decided to devour. Friends, you know that feeling when someone walks into a room convinced they're the smartest person alive? When their arrogance fills the air before they even speak? That's what happened here. The man standing before Judge Judy wasn't just any lawyer. He was a corporate shark, the kind who billed $500 an hour just to breathe. He had the confidence of someone who thought television courtrooms were for entertainment, not justice. And yet, he was about to learn that this wasn't entertainment. It was education. You could feel the tension ripple across the audience. The producer, sitting off camera, whispered to a cameraman, "Keep it rolling. This is going to be good." Judge Judy finally spoke, calm, composed. "Mr. Halpern, you'll have your turn. Right now, I'm asking the plaintiff to speak." But he interrupted again. "With all due respect, Your Honor, perhaps the plaintiff should have hired a real attorney to make her case." A few gasps broke out in the crowd. The plaintiff, a single mother, lowered her eyes. She'd been through this before. Men like him used confidence as a weapon. Judge Judy leaned back, silent. No gavel, no shouting, just that quiet stare, the one that says, "You have no idea what you just started." And then she raised her eyebrows, just slightly, but everyone in the room felt it, the shift. Because in her courtroom, that expression meant something. It wasn't surprise. It was a warning. Viewers watching at home would later describe that moment as the calm before history. The second arrogance met its teacher. And you, watching now, you'll see exactly what happens when ego walks into the wrong courtroom and mistakes silence for weakness. Because Judge Judy, she was just getting started. His name was Richard Halpern, a name that carried weight in Manhattan's glass towers, partner at a corporate firm so powerful that even judges hesitated to challenge their clients. The kind of man who wore confidence like armor and used charm like a blade. To his colleagues, he was a strategist. To his rivals, a storm in a suit. But behind all that polish, there was one defining trait. He hated being told no. Halpern built his empire by intimidation. He was the kind of attorney who didn't just argue cases, he crushed them. Secretaries cried in his office. Opposing counsel dreaded seeing his name on filings. To him, the courtroom wasn't a temple of truth. It was a stage, and winning, not justice, was the applause he lived for. But power has a way of blinding the people who hold it. Somewhere along the way, Halpern stopped seeing opponents as people. He saw them as obstacles, and obstacles were meant to be removed. So when his wealthy client, a luxury property developer, was sued by a single mother for wrongful eviction and damages, Halpern didn't see a woman fighting for fairness. He saw an opportunity to perform. Originally, this case wasn't supposed to see the light of day. It was routine, destined to vanish into the quiet paperwork of civil court. But one of Judge Judy's producers stumbled upon it while scanning through small claims filings. The setup was irresistible: a powerful corporate lawyer versus a struggling single mother, in a battle that mirrored a nation's moral imbalance. The producer made a call. The show offered to mediate the dispute on air, compensating both parties for their time. The plaintiff agreed immediately. She believed exposure might protect her from further retaliation. Halpern's client hesitated, but Halpern didn't. In fact, he pushed for it. Why? Because he saw cameras as mirrors, and he loved his reflection. He told colleagues over lunch, "It'll be fun. I'll educate that TV judge on what real law looks like." Laughter followed. Someone joked, "Don't make her cry on camera." Halpern smirked, "Only if she deserves it." It wasn't about justice. It wasn't even about the client anymore. This was about legacy, about proving that even under the bright lights of daytime television, he could bend anyone to his will. But in chasing fame, he chose the wrong arena. Judge Judy's courtroom wasn't designed for theatrics. It was designed for truth, raw, unpolished, and often unforgiving. And the irony? The very thing Halpern craved, control, was the first thing she'd take from him. The morning of the taping, he arrived early as if he owned the place. Black suit, perfect cufflinks. He shook hands with the crew, dropped names, and even gave the bailiff unsolicited legal trivia. Cameras rolled quietly in the background as he rehearsed his smirk in the reflection of the polished courtroom table. He looked at the plaintiff, nervous, holding a folder too large for her trembling hands, and whispered to his assistant, "This won't take long." But arrogance makes people underestimate silence. Because sitting across from him, behind that bench, was a woman who'd spent decades dismantling men who thought law was a game. And while Halpern was busy preparing his performance, Judge Judy was preparing his lesson. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he stepped into that courtroom, his career clock started ticking. The cameras were ready. The audience was ready. And somewhere behind that calm expression, so was she.